Hi, this is Beth from Around the Table Yarns. We're talking about the Year of Hats January hat pattern today. I'm wearing a sample of the January hat, and I was just saying that I think it fits really nicely, but it does not come all the way to the bottom of my ears. And if you have an issue with your hats not being long enough, or if you have a lot of hair, or if you have a big head, you might want to increase in the very beginning. I'm going to mute everybody. In the very beginning, you might want to make a longer brim than the 2 inches that the pattern calls for. So this one was done with the standard 2 inches. I did mine with a 2-inch brim. But trying it on, I would say that if you particularly like your ears covered, that you might want to make it a little bit longer. I'm trying to see if I can. Trying to see if I can see all the participants, and I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves unless you have a question, please. Okay. All right, so here is my sample of the hat, and I just want to talk a little bit about the construction issues that we're gonna see. The first thing that you'll notice, it's a regular cast on. We're not doing a tubular, we're not doing anything funky, we're not, we don't have to use a crochet hook. We're just doing a regular cast on for this hat. The cast on number is 90, and it feels good. It feels like the right size. I will admit that I did not do my brim with a smaller size needle because last night when I needed to do it, I couldn't find my smaller size needle. So you can see that my brim is a little bit bigger than the sample hat. And then I'm still using the same needle, which is the needle for the body of the hat. So I think it'll be okay. So if you don't have the smallest size needle for the brim, I think it's okay because it's a pretty nice rib. The ribbing, I'm going to go to the beginning of my round. Please notice that there's a knit 2, purl 1. I'm going to show it on the blue. It's a little easier to see. There's a knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, and then purl 1, knit 1, 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 purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, knit 2. So this section is written into this pattern is written not where you might expect it. It's in the stitch patterns here. So this is page 2 of the chart of the instructions. So this is the January hat by Courtney Kelly. It's done in 1 skein of Germantown wool, 220 yards. The pattern repeat is supposed to be 3 1/4 inches wide, and that's the 18 stitches. And I could measure that and tell you that it is or isn't. So the one we have here as a sample is, I think that's, so it's 1 past. So it's very, very close to gauge. It's 1 stitch past there. So it's supposed to be 3 1/4. I think it's very close to gauge. So getting gauge with this, it fits my head pretty well. Again, if your head is bigger or smaller, I can tell you that my head around is about 22.5 inches this time. I don't remember what it was last time. So this fits a head of about 22.5 inches. Okay, so the things I want to point out about the pattern to start with, I did put a little note on our email yesterday. If you wanted to do homework for this, you could start by casting on and doing the ribbing, but the brim ribbing sets up the pattern for the hat. So you do these knit 2, purl 1, knit 2 ribs at the beginning, and then it's spaced out with the single ribbing, and then you have that little double again, and that's the 18 stitches of the pattern repeat right there, and that goes around 5 times. So you're setting up the pattern, which means, please note, and I've colored my chart already. Let's get that shadow off of there. Oh, the shadow is coming from up above. Okay, so the beginning of the round is an orange line that starts immediately to the right of the first cable. And the reason I am pointing that out so carefully to you right now is because I started my beginning of round at the first bobble and had to rip back the first section when I realized that I was off, because my double, if this is the beginning of your round, then your cable comes first and then the rest of the bobbles follow it. So that means you would start here, you would do the cable first, and then 3 of the bobbles and purl stitches, and then 3 more bobbles and purl stitches, and then that would be the end of your first section. So please do note that the chart, unlike the written out part of the pattern, the chart, and actually, sorry, there is no written out part of the pattern, so we will be reading it from the chart. So that chart is a little bit misleading, and I've just put an arrow and the word and the initials BOR for beginning of round, because when you get to the end of your ribbing, you should be ready to do a knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, and that's where we're going to place the first cable for the diamonds. Okay. The second thing that I want to talk about is to modify this cable and all of these cables so that you don't need to use 2 cable needles. The way this cable, the pink cable, which is the C212LP, the pink cable is at the bottom and the top of the diamond. It's only done in the pattern. It's done at the bottom, it's done at the top of the diamond, and then it's done again right at the very end of the shaping. And the reason I want to make a note of it is because this pattern was the first in the year of hats, and it started right off with a double cable. And I want to be able to show you how to do a double cable and how to do that with only 1 cable needle and not have to do 2 cable needles, which is fiddly beyond belief. And then the next thing I want to talk about with you is the bobbles. These bobbles all are written as a knit 1, purl 1, knit 1 into the same stitch, and then turn, and then purl the 3 stitches together. And I'm going to show you a quick modification that you don't need to turn to do the bobble. And then the last thing that's important to notice with this chart is that you read it, as always, we're reading it from right to left, and you're always going to start the row on the right hand side, but the beginning of the round changes as we go across. So in the first round, you're going to start the beginning of the round immediately before the cable. So the first thing we do is this double cable. And then we do 6 bobbles interspersed with purl stitches, and then we repeat. And that's our 18 stitch repeat. In the next round, we're going to work above the bobbles in purl, above the cable in knit 2, purl 1, knit 2. So essentially you'll start at the beginning of the round and you'll do knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, and then you'll purl the remaining, I think that's 15 stitches or 11, no, 13. 1, 2, 3. I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So you're gonna purl, you'll knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, and then you'll purl 13 stitches to the next marker. I do recommend placing a marker at the end of each section if you feel like it. If you feel like you are going to not notice or go past that cable without noticing it. You don't have to, and the issue with placing a marker is that this beginning of round and before the cable in each section is going to change. It's going to move 1 stitch over every other round until you get to the halfway point, and then it's going to slowly move back 1 stitch to the left until you get to the top of the diamond. This is not a big deal. It's especially not a big deal the way that I do the cable turn. So I think we'll find that it's pretty easy to manage, but you need to pay attention to those 3 things. So the 3 things we're talking about are that the beginning of round starts before the cable and always is immediately before the cable. It moves because the cable is traveling. The second thing is that there's a way to do this double cable to only use 1 cable needle. And the third thing is to use a 1-sided bobble and not have to turn in the middle. Okay, so let's get started with some demonstrating. I'm going to start with demonstrating. I have a little dog under me, so I have to be careful about how I pull up to the thing. I'm going to start with demonstrating this cable. So here I have it in yellow, and I'm going to turn that down. Can everybody see that okay? Is it too bright or is it okay? And actually, going to cast on and do it really fast. Okay, so I've got a setup here of the double. So the knit 2 together, knit 2, sorry, the knit 2, the purl 1, the knit 2, and then I have a purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1 to show the rest of the work. And there, it starts with a purl 1. So I'm just going to start with my purl 1. And then in the pattern, it tells you to take the first 2 stitches and move them onto a cable needle and move them to the front of the work. Okay, so I am going to do that. Oh, hello. My short little stubby needle there. Okay, so I'm going to slide my short end of my cable hook into those 2 stitches and slide them onto the top of the U and hold the U forward. And then the next instruction is to put the purl stitch that's in the middle of those 2 sets of knit 2 onto a separate cable needle and hold it to the back. And then to knit these 2 from the end of this section, from the end of this 5 stitch section. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to put the tip of my right needle into the fronts of those 2 stitches. I'm going to push the stitches off with the 1 purl stitch in front of it. And as I do that, I'm going to move this needle, my left needle, and put it right into that purl stitch. Okay, so it was off for a second, and then I just grabbed it with my left needle. Now my stitches are crossing, and I can just slip these 2 back onto the left needle. So now I can knit them in the order that the pattern wants me to. knit 2. I'm going to purl that 1. And now I can either slip these 2 back on. So the short end to the tip of my needle, I can slip these back onto the left needle. Or if I prefer, I can knit them. So taking my yarn back to the back, I can knit them from the cable needle itself. And it's sort of a toss up which way I'll do it. It depends on my cable needle sometimes. If I don't like my cable needle and I don't want to fuss with it, I will often slip it over to the left needle. But this one doesn't really bother me. Okay, so that's the cable only using 1 cable needle. Does anybody want to see that again? Are we good? So then the next thing is to do the bobble. So there's a purl stitch and then there's a bobble. And the way that the pattern is written to tell you how to do the bobble, you take the yarn to the back after your purl stitch, you knit into the stitch, you bring your yarn forward and purl into the same leg without taking that leg off of the left needle. Then you'll take your yarn back and you'll knit into that leg and let the stitch come off. The pattern then tells you to turn the whole work and purl these 3 together. And I like to sort of give it a little tug so everything's kind of even and then it comes off. And then you have to turn back, replace that stitch onto the right needle, bring the yarn forward and purl the next stitch. What I'd like to suggest is that that's fine and it makes a fine bump, but you could knit and purl and knit into the bobble or to make the bobble. And then instead of turning, you could take your left needle and insert it into the fronts of those 3 stitches, wrap like you were doing an SSK around the back needle and bring it through. And that makes that kind of a bobble. And you don't have to turn the work back and forth each time. So it's a little more effort on the bobble, but it gives you, I'm just going to go back and knit these stitches across and show you what that looks like in the next row. So I would argue that that gives you a nice bobble. It's not exactly the same as the one as written, but you don't have to turn your work back and forth every time you do it. So that's what the bobble looked like from them, and this is what the bobble looks like from me. So theirs is a little bumpier, and this one's a little smoother, but they're both bobbles. So the next thing that happens is we have the cable stitches in row 3 are just 3 stitch cables. And I can do that here and demonstrate it. I just want you to notice that the marker would be here for the beginning of the round. Okay, so the marker on your needle would be immediately before the cable on the right-hand side. So what's the secret or the trick to moving the marker as you go around? The trick would be, again, to do this without a cable needle. So I'm going to be moving these 2 stitches in front of this stitch to the right. So I'm going to put my needle, my right-hand needle, into the fronts of those 2 stitches. And I like to do this over a table or over something in my lap that will catch the marker, because I'm just going to let it drop off. boop, and then I'm going to catch the purl stitch there. I'm going to put these stitches back on the needle, and I'm going to pick up my marker, and it's now back on the right hand side. And then we go ahead and we just work those stitches in order. My marker is going to slide around, so we're just not going to look for it. But we're going to work those stitches, knit 2, purl 1. The purl stitch from the previous row gets knitted because there's a moss stitch in the middle. So I've got knit 2, purl 1, knit 1, and then we're going to do the other cross. This time, the 3 stitches, the first 2 are going to cross in front of the 3rd stitch, and that purl stitch is going to move inside of the cable. So to do that, I'm going to leave my yarn in front because I'm going to be purling next. I'm going to insert my needle into the back of the purl stitch. So you see the next 2 stitches are the 2 knit stitches here and here, and I'm putting my right needle into the back of the purl stitch. So it looks like that. I'm going to push those 2 stitches off the needle. See how they pop off, and before they go anywhere, I just put them back on. Now I can put my needle in the back of it. I don't even have to put it all the way back onto the left-hand needle. I'm right in position here to complete my purl stitch. Yarn to the back and knit 2. And then you've moved over 1. This time you purl over the bobble, and then the next stitch is the next bobble. So I'll just show you that one more time. Knit into the front, sorry, knit into the leg, purl into the same leg, knit into the same leg, and then slide your left needle tip into the fronts of those stitches. Pull it through sort of like an SSK. And that's a bobble. And then the next stitch would be purled. So it's a very memorizable pattern. So I would say, Anna, doing it with these 2 alterations of not using a cable needle and doing the bobbles without turning the work, that it would make it a lot faster and simpler to do and not as fiddly. What do you think?
Yeah, I think not turning, because I was turning for every bobble.
Yeah.
So this,
and there's
will
a
be
lot
much,
of bobbles.
much faster. There is a lot of bobbles.
So I think this would be much faster. I think this one looks a little flatter because it's right at the edge of the work. I'll show you the ones that I was working. I think these look okay. I'm trying to give you, they're standing out from the work. I think they look pretty good. I mean, all bobbles, I always feel like you need to like fiddle with them a little bit to make them really stand out. They're never quite as poppy as I want them to be, but I feel like these turned out pretty well.
So I was moving mine out a lot as I was blocking it. I was moving them out. But now I was poking them out when I was blocking them.
Mm-hmm.
But now my son has been using the hat, so it's all been shoved down in a school bag, so it's or half flat. Because he's been using it. He takes whatever hat. So
well, that's good. I'm glad he's using it.
Yeah.
So going back to what we were saying before, I think it would not be a terrible thing to make this part longer at the beginning. I think that there's room, and I know some of you like a longer brim anyway, but I think the more you lengthen this brim, like think of it as, you know, if this is hitting the middle part of my ear, you could easily make it 4 inches long. And if you really like a doubled over brim, you could make it even longer than that. But you would want to make sure that you worked it in the established ribbing pattern, so that when you get to the top and you're ready to start the cables, you can. The last part of this is that they did not chart the top of it, but they did write it out, and it's one of those pretty, I can't move my pom-pom so easily. It's a pretty abrupt, so this is the last row here. This is the last rows, that's row 28 is the second row of the cable cross. And then they go straight into what's clearly a decrease section, decreasing in about 3 inches or less to get to the final closure of the hat. So I didn't set up to do that as a demonstration tonight. I just want to talk you through it. And then if you have issues with that part of it, hello, where's my, I want you to come in. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. So let's just look at our pattern and focus. Okay, that looks much more in focus. I hope you can all read that. So the body is just work rounds 1 through 28 of the diamond cable from the chart ending, they say ending last round 2 stitches before the end of round marker placement, see notes. So I just want to clarify, ending round 28, 2 stitches before the end of the round marker placement, see notes. So that's all they're saying is you want to stop here on the last repeat. You're going to stop here before starting the round that is the round 1 of the decreases. Okay, so you'll get to there, you'll slip the last 2 stitches of the round onto the cable needle, so there will be another cable, and you're essentially going to be doing a move of those cables to the right, just like you did here, but it's going to go over 2. Onto the back slipper. And then knit 2, purl 2 together from cable needle, knit 1. So the stitches are written out. How did you find the shaping at the top, Anna? Was this particularly difficult or was it okay?
It was okay. It's pretty. I'm just looking at the hat. It's pretty decreasing, but it's also, yeah, just reading, but it went pretty well.
It went pretty well.
Yeah,
so,
I didn't have too much issues.
I don't think in the hour that we have to do this, I can really demonstrate every round of the crown decrease. But I think what happens with this kind of patterning is that you want to read very carefully what you're doing. So make sure that you're understanding the directions that are there. So slip last 2 stitches of the round onto the cable needle. That means we'll be holding them to the back. We're going to slip the marker to the right hand needle, and then we're going to knit 2, purl 2 together from the cable needle and knit 1. So there's a decrease right there. That's the beginning of the decrease. And then you're going to do the next cross immediately, slip 2 to the cable needle, hold to front. So this is the part where the stitches are spreading out. And there's going to be decreases worked inside of that area. So they didn't show that. And maybe that's kind of difficult to chart. But what's happening is you're moving this over, working a purl two together, and then, sorry, you're holding them to the back, slipping the marker to the right hand needle, knitting two, and purling two together from the cable needle, sorry. And then slipping two to the cable needle, hold them to the front, purl two together, and then knit two from the cable needle. And then purl two. Make bobble, purl one twice, make bobble, purl two, slip two stitches to the cable needle. It's all just a matter of reading the pattern, kind of like working a recipe. When you're there, it should line up with what's underneath it. So that's, I think, the most important part of this is that what they're doing, it's easier if you can see what it is that they're doing. What they're doing is they're moving these cables. I wonder where the beginning of our round is. The beginning of the round is here. So they're moving these cables to the right. They're working decreases inside. You can see there's a decrease here. And then they're doing a section of bobbles. And then they're repeating that. And then the next round is going to be worked probably without any decreases. That's round two. So rounds 1 and 3 and 5, 7 are each getting a little bit smaller. So round 2, so only in round 1 are they decreasing 10 stitches. In round 3, they're decreasing 10 stitches. In round 5, they're decreasing 10 stitches. In round 7, and then they're decreasing in round 8 more. They're purling 3 together, so you lose 20 stitches. And then there's a plain round, so that's where it's going to change a little bit. You're going to do the 20 decreases in an in-between round by purling 3 together. Then you're going to do a round of essentially just cabling. That's going to be this round up here, just cabling around. You're almost done. Knit 2, purl 1 is just a simple following the 30 stitches around. And then in 11, you're going to get rid of some more stitches until you're down to 25, and 12, you'll get down to 15 stitches by knitting 2 together and SSK and then purl 1 all the way around. And that's the end of it. You're just going to draw off those 15 stitches into the closure at the top of the, into this closure at the top of the hat. So I hope that's clear. I've shown you the making the cable or doing the cables. I've shown you the bobbles, and I've talked to you about moving the markers. I think the sizing for this hat is pretty good. If you're using different yarn, you do want to check your gauge. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a quick one. So just to be clear, when you start the decrease rounds, you're taking the last 2 stitches on like the row that was before the decrease starts, right?
Yep, it's the same kind of thing, except that it's 2 stitches, not 1. So for each of these, they're moving that over 1. And then I think this one, because this top one, because so it would be above that, it would be row 29, because they're doing a decrease on the other side of it, they're moving it over 2, and they're starting to decrease inside of the cables. Does that make sense?
You. Yeah, thanks.
Anything else? All right, I'm going to go ahead and